Hi, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my craft room. So happy to have you here with me today. It's time for a new color and chat video, and this time I'm using the adorable manatees from Fawn in the Manatee-rific stamp set. I have two guys here today. My manatees are a little different than normal. I'm going to show an extra step of how I add some details to my manatee, and then I chose for small images my favorite kind of neon pastel colors. I did point out that I got excited and accidentally colored in my little seaweed the wrong spot on my coloring guide, and I'll talk about that later. But let's jump into coloring my manatees. So I am using my brown grays for my manatees because they are very gray looking sea cows. So I'm actually starting with BG6 as my darkest color for shadowing my manatees. I do have a BG9, but I'm going to use that for adding those little tiny details after my ink has settled and dried a little bit on my manatee. So really going in with that BG6 and creating some nice deep shadows. They are very large creatures or critters, I guess. So there is a lot of space for shadowing here if that's your style, which is my style. So I really wanted to make sure that I had nice shadowing on those larger areas. And I'm repeating the same step for both manatees. I know that I'm basically just showing the same thing twice because it's almost the same shape and shadowing, but this video would be really short if I only showed one manatee coloring, so I'm going to show both sides so you can see how you can change the shadow depending on how your manatee is facing. Finally, I'm going to color in my manatee using BG2. I said on my coloring guide ×2 because I'm really saturating that BG2 into my manatee. The jump between 4 and 2 is a little bit more than I like for my critters. I really need to get that 3 in between. So I'm really going in there and trying to really bring out that darkness and that shadow and blending it into the center of my manatee. So I put ×2, but really just keep coloring until you really like the blend between the 6, 4, and 2, giving you a nice shadow without any major, like really harsh lines. So once I am all done coloring in this second manatee, I'm actually going to wait before jumping into step 4, which is the top of my next paper guide. And that's because I wanted my lighter ink that I just colored to kind of dry a little bit. I didn't want the little stippling I'm going to add to my manatees to fade into that BG2. I wanted to give it a chance to dry. I hope that made sense. I want those little dots that I'm going to stipple to really stay dots. So then I'm going to jump into my two tones. I'm using a medium and a light to color in all of these little tiny images. I went with really pastel kind of neon vibe colors. These are my favorite two color combos. So I'm coloring in the little pink flower, an orange and yellow shell, and then I have some green seaweed. So as you can see here on my guide, the one on top actually has both shades. I got excited and accidentally colored the second one, or accidentally colored the first one as I should have colored the second one. So not a big deal. Just note if you follow my guide to just flip those images around in your head. And then for my bubbles, I'm going to color with a dark color and then, medium and then the light again. But when I'm blending that medium to light, I actually leave a little bit of white on the other edge of the balloon. So the opposite side of where I laid down that medium tone blue, I left it white. I didn't color all the way to the edge. And you can kind of see it here. That way my balloons kind of have a dark side and my bubbles have a dark side and a light side, kind of more of a reflective side on the bubbles. So now that those are done and my manatees should be dry, I'm bringing out that BG9 and adding that little stippling. I'm adding just little dots going around the edges of my manatee, so where there would be more texture on the manatee on its fins, a little bit on its kind of side of a tummy, and just trying to give it a little more detail. This is just a fun way to add in more depth and more texture to your critters. And then when I'm done adding that, I will grab my FS4, which is what I use for their little cheeks to add a little bit of a blush. And then I'm going to grab my white gel pen and add more stippling, but this time with a white gel pen. I do add some lines to add like highlights to my critters on my final project, but here I'm just showing how I'm adding the white to my manatees, just again to add texture more so than highlights. Once those are done, I would normally just grab my die cuts and cut them out and then use them on a card. Here is a close-up of these cute little manatees and my pastel neon accessories, I guess you could say, plant life and shells. And then here is a final look at a card that I used with those manatees and my little shells and seaweed. I created an ink blended background and just added some fun details and a sentiment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!